Welcome to CERT's IT Service Solution Podcasts. In this episode, our host, Jon Grainger, CTIO, talks to Iwona Winiarska, who is an Agile Coach and Delivery Consultant, and was also a finalist in the Women in Tech Awards 2020. They discuss the importance of both customer-centric design and Agile methodology, and how combining these together can elevate your digital transformation projects. Let's dive in.
Just want to say thank you very much for joining us. It's been quite a while in the making, hasn't it? It's been a few, I can remember when we first sort of talked about this, it was quite a few months ago. I think it might have been before Christmas even.
Thank you so much for having me and having also this opportunity to just share my insights, my thoughts, my experience. So I really appreciate that.
It's our pleasure. So we've got a really interesting title called Customer-centric Agile. Do you want to just say, Iwona, a bit about your particular interest in the topic?
Sure. I think that's a very good question. And I'm wondering myself how it started, because for me, it's like a journey when instead of delivering projects and just outputs and thinking, what is the next project I'm going to deliver, when I started thinking about users or customers at the end of that line. And that was actually also when I got into Agile myself. So as far as I remember, it was in 2015. And I also discovered that there are better ways of working. So at that time, I was working for a advertising agency in a very fast-paced environment. Very interesting work, but then on the other hand, I just learned new things. And I think this, what I learned at that time helped me understand what actually really matters. And no matter, what type of industry you're in, if you're working in IT as I do, or if you're selling shoes, if you work in finance, if you're an accountant, it's really important to consider people at the end of that process who receive your services or your product. So for me, it was really an eye-opening thing when I started thinking about other people, whatever what I do, how they're going to use it, how they're going to benefit from that. And as I said, I've been working in IT for about 15 years. And I think that aspect of considering people at the center of everything we do was kind of missing, especially in different technical teams I was working with. Later on, I also moved to DevOps, which is even more technical area. And I felt like, come on, there is something we need to do differently, whatever what we do. And no matter if you have, for example, customers who buy your services or even your colleagues in the same organization that you do the work for them, they're customers as well. And I think that approach it's really important, and it helped me personally and professionally to deliver, I guess, better job.
Cool. So Iwona, maybe so we did a previous episode looking at Agile, particularly in the public sector context.
Okay.
So and I think when we got the feedback from that, there was a lot of people really interested in Agile, but maybe hadn't used it fully, so they still sort of had that interest. So
yeah,
would it be all right if I attempted a short definition of customer-centric Agile, and then you can say, Jon, you've completely got the wrong end of the stick, or it's a bit like that, and we can sort of build on it? Because for me, this is the sort of reading through this and preparing for this session is where I've had a bit of a penny dropping moment. So
yeah, of course.
is that
sounds
okay?
great.
So I think what you're proposing in terms of, like you say, putting people in the middle of everything, we're going to call them customers, because they could be real, absolute external paying customers, but they could also be internal customers.
That's right.
It does a couple of things. The first thing is you were saying about projects have a start and a finish. So there's a real sense of you do a project, finish it, and then it's like, well, what next? Whereas I think with the customer-centric view, it's just continuous. It's basically, as long as you've got customers, you've got something to be getting on with. And so I've seen lots of places that have made the leap from project thinking to product thinking, so
Mm-hmm.
they're thinking of a product life cycle and all the rest of it. But for me, I think you've moved it on another notch, because it's like, well, actually, the thing that really lasts the test of time is customers, because products have a life cycle, projects have a start and finish, but customers, if you're in business, will always be there.
Yeah.
So I thought it was really interesting that you're pivoting on what the customer wants, rather than just going. I mean, obviously, that could lead to a set of products, but it's mainly what the customer is after. And then there's all sorts of questions I want to ask you about what that then
Sure.
means, because you're sort of wiring yourself up to the electricity mains, aren't you? You're not dodging any kind of. If you're going to listen to what the customer wants, there's no room to hide, if that makes sense.
Yes, yes, it does make sense. I totally agree.
Why doesn't everyone do this? Why hasn't this become a massive movement, or is it about to become a massive movement? Or maybe everyone does it, and I'm the only one who's sort of looking at this thinking, this is such a good idea for running agile.
Yeah. Um, I know that it may sound a little bit like a trendy word to be agile or to be customer centric. And personally, I've met a few organizations who want to do, things as the rest of the organizations. However, it's really important to truly understand what that really means, and it's not easy. I think it's super difficult. Um, but I guess for me, the way how I understand it, is that um, we can deliver better products and services to our customers. Uh, if I take it further, and if I can add a little bit more context to that, what this really means is that we can avoid solutions that are not fit for purpose. And what that really means is that we can save a lot of money, potentially. For example, if we build something that doesn't meet our customer need, then we wouldn't be spending so much money on something that actually doesn't work. On the other hand, we can deliver better products. Even if the product is right, we can position it in a way that it really solves the customer problem. And I think what this is all about is not just, I guess, trying to do something for the customer, but it's really about solving the problems, no matter what the problems are, again, or what the type of customer really is. For me, it's about solving exactly what that particular
Yeah,
customer really needs. And obviously, there are a lot of other benefits, like saving money,
yeah,
like doing it better, designing it better. Also, by the way, when I say designing, I mean designing not as, styling or aesthetics, but it's really
yeah,
how we're gonna
but-
design that product,
yeah,
how it's gonna work, how a customer will know about the product, how they're gonna use it, what happens then after they finish interacting with that product.
yes, yeah. Because that was a
Yeah.
question I had for you, Ivana, which was, we're not saying literally deliver what the customer has asked for. So if the customer, I mean, in some cases maybe yes, yeah, but in most of the cases, it's about looking at the problem that the customer, the customer might present to you in lots of different ways, but it's like really understanding it and then looking behind that as to what the actual problem is that needs to be solved.
Yes,
And
that's right.
then focusing on that, because some people, again, whenever you talk about methods or approaches, there's a lot of people who take it very literally, and they'll say, well, if I did everything my customer asked me for, I'd be doing different things every week. And now there is an element to that, because this is what I find really interesting, because if you go customer centric, you sort of become, I don't want to make this sound too much of an Americanism, although we do have folks across the Atlantic who listen to the channel, but it's kind of sort of super agile. You have to plan for, I think you call it pivots, where there is a
Yeah.
proper change. And I suppose that isn't just for folks that are servicing a consumer market, but that can also be if you're in a highly competitive industry. Yeah. So if you're working for, in quotes, internal customers, the market can change rapidly there as well if it's very competitive. So this kind of, well, forget about all of that because we've got a project to deliver and we're just going to carry on and deliver. What you're saying is, no, you have to be very alive to changes. And that sounds, that sounds amazing, but it sounds like that could be quite a challenge to set up to be that, to be able to respond that quickly. So how do you do that?
Oh, that's a very good question. So I totally agree with what you said. It's not really about delivering what our customers really want, but it's very often actually it's like kind of like putting a mirror in front of them and showing this is what you told us, this is how you do these things now. And perhaps that might mean something XYZ. It's actually showing the situation as it is. And very often our customers, um, they just don't know what they want. They think again that they want different things. But I think for us as IT professionals, Agile professionals, it's important to help our customers to actually identify what is that need or that problem that they're trying to fix and help them with that. So it's taking them on the journey.
Yeah.
And I think the way how to do that, the easiest way, I think is collaborating with them. So it's about involving them in that designing process so that we can create a product together with them, or that particular, doesn't need to be a product, it can be just a part of the product or that certain customer journey. So through collaboration, early feedback, a lot of conversations, workshops, facilitation is key here. I think we can learn more about our customers, and then design that solution with them. And that involvement and that engagement is key.
Yeah. So I don't think we're going to be particularly controversial on this because, I completely agree with you. One of the things we picked up when we were talking about public sector Agile, and something that I just observed generally with Agile, is just because Agile gives you the ability to start really quickly. So if you wanted to, you could, just get stuff done, let's get some developers in. Why aren't we coding? That kind of. But actually, and I think this is just universal in my opinion. It's about having really rock solid design, and
Yes.
and what I just wanted to do a couple of observations, see if this chimes with you at all. So I think when they look at projects, products, customer-centric, anything, one of the biggest sort of markers for quality is not just were the requirements met, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also were the requirements correct? Were they the right requirements in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes technology teams interact with the business or with the customer or folks who've got a genuine stake in the business, but not in an equal measure. So maybe we send people who are junior, or and so that relationship isn't there for me to say, or for you to say to me, John, actually, I'm not quite sure that's what you really want. Have you thought of this? Whereas if we could have a different relationship where I might say, Iwona, well, that's what you've said. That's what we're going to deliver. No questions. We delivered what Iwona asked for. She wanted, a chair with 3 legs and, and all the rest of it. And that's what we've delivered, sort of thing, which I would call meeting the target and missing the point kind of thing.
I like that. I love it.
So that, so I think getting the requirements and the design up front also means being really considered about who is actually in that initial team, and having that's where you need all your experience, and effort. You need to throw the kitchen sink at those meetings because you're going to pay for that for the rest of the life of the work, and you could end up going down the wrong avenue. I suppose also, sorry, Iwona, I will shut up. But I'm thinking, if you're also saying, we're going to have to be very responsive, so we might have to change things rapidly because that's the market we're in. that's another design consideration.
Absolutely.
Because in software, we all know if you want to just do something once, you can code it in a certain way, and then when they say I want to change it, you say, well, you didn't tell us you wanted to change it. Now we've got to rewrite it all. There's quite an overhead, isn't there, to creating products that are configurable.
Yeah.
So, God, yeah, just so much in there to unpack.
There's definitely a lot of things. And actually, as we talk about this, I just realized how complex it is, or it might be. Although it's actually very simple, the principles are very simple. I think when we apply it to a real case scenario, I think it's not always that easy to be customer centric. But I think just to touch on a few points that you've mentioned, what I really like, and this is my, again, personal experience, when there is, like a new team and a new initiative, and the team defines the mission, and we have that first kickoff meeting, and then usually we'll start with technical teams who just develop things. So very often, like the first stages, which are about discovering and understanding the current solution, or the lack of product, or the current product, and then trying to define that new solution, is very often missed in that cycle. And I do understand that people want to deliver value quickly. They're very passionate. Obviously, some of the team we're working with, they are junior, but there are also more experienced, and also there are, different types of backgrounds, and people basically want to do a great job. And they want to deliver things quickly and in the best way they can, which I completely understand. But very often we just kind of forget about that initial stage. The client tells us, this is the brief, these are the requirements. We need a chair with 3 legs, and this is what we build. So the first actually stage is development. And I think that's not definitely what I would recommend. I would propose that we all take a step back. We go back to the blackboards, and we start actually thinking about, okay, so who are our customers? What are they trying to achieve? What are their needs? Etc. etc. What are their limitations? Why they haven't done it this way before? What's stopping them? What's preventing them from doing this a certain way? And even before that, it's good to talk to real customer. So what I mean by that is that I'm a supporter of user research or customer research, or gathering customer feedback. There's a variety of different techniques every team can use. So it can be face-to-face, it can be via a sweet talk, or using different communication tools online. It can be even a survey. It can be even an email asking them for feedback. And I think that's really important, that we can ask people what they really, not just what they want, but what are they trying to do? How do they do it? And how we could make it better. That's very important before we actually start doing anything. So you've mentioned also public sector, and I think that what I really like about public sector is that they solve the whole kind of product or service lifecycle in a way that there are different stages and different phases. So the first one is discovery, then you move on to alpha, then in beta you actually start with building things, developing, programming. And I think that really makes sense to first understand, for example, what we're trying to achieve, what are the needs of our customers or users in that scenario, but then also what are our internal needs as an organization, as the business. What is our strategy? Is that aligned with our strategy? So it's really, I think, just to be even more controversial, I think it's important to consider customer needs, but also balance those needs with our needs as an organization as well. Because ultimately, everyone will ask about return on investments. why we're doing things. We need to be profitable. So obviously,
Yeah.
these are also very important questions to
Yeah.
bear in mind, and to make sure that we can balance everyone's needs and to do it in the way that the customers are happy, as well as our organization and
So,
employees.
Ivana, I think what you've just articulated is essential business strategy, but delivered through an agile delivery. So, you're talking about satisfying your customers, but doing it so that so it's sustainable, the company can continue, and all those, every element that you've just described for me is it's almost like a proxy for business strategy, which is I find fascinating. So there's a couple of things I was thinking of. When I was first reading about this, I was thinking of traditional customer, buy a code, use an app, mass market sort of stuff. But I was actually also thinking in any business, like a business to business, a B2B. Actually, there's a school of thought that says businesses can become very sort of inside out focused. So they will say, we want to do this, but actually they've kind of even themselves have lost the voice of the end customer. So when you're in that early design stage, and again, I think this goes back to how senior and experienced and confident this team needs to be, they might come back from a meeting and say, we need to speak to marketing because I think we need to run this past marketing to get a view of what the actual external customer, the actual end customer might be thinking. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's a really big ask for a lot of technology teams that just they haven't even got this lens necessarily switched on. They're taking that first set of requirements on face value.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've ever heard people say, that's the business. The business have told us. It's almost
Many
like, well,
times,
it
yes.
feels like, technology isn't part of the business. But I think we're getting to this crossroads where what you've just said is you could have rewritten that just purely in business strategy language and said, what's the 101 of a company? It's just increasingly things are being delivered by technology. So I was thinking, you said it's not easy. I love that because I always say, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. So the fact it's not easy should excite certain folks because it means if you get to master this, they can give you competitive advantage because it's not
Absolutely.
easy. So it's well worth pursuing. And difficult things are normally worth pursuing. Yeah, I think easy come, easy go is the expression. And I think one other one I wanted to just throw in is when you're having that first discussion, I was wondering whether you could share any what I would call red flags, and I'll give you a red flag to give you an example. So you go in and you speak to someone in the business, and they'll say something like, "It needs to be cheaper." But I always think if a business says something really obvious, we're not really anywhere near the problem space because the follow-on question might be, well, what needs to be cheaper? Why is it cheaper? What are you actually referring to? Who's told you that? All these different pieces. But I'm just wondering whether you have any tips that you can give people which are red flags for when you're in that first meeting and you're maybe not getting the content or the engagement that you need. So when you come out of that session, we haven't really scratched the surface. We haven't really got stuck in to anything we can get our teeth into. So that was one question. Sorry, I know there's so many things going on in my mind for what you said. But the other one was about resisting the urge to do development too early.
Mm-hmm.
I think you should hold on until you're absolutely bursting to do software development and not a second sooner. Because I think people start too soon. And there's this sort of ill-informed view that, well, the developers can iterate because this is agile. But actually, you end up in a really weird sort of pragmatic loop, and you'll be going down some sort of cul-de-sac pretty quick if you start too early. So I think a lot of folks probably start a bit too early. In my experience, I've people previously have said, "Jon, we need developers immediately," and I'll say, "Well, show me the design," and then it all goes quiet. Sorry, there's a whole load in there to unpack. Is there anything there that struck you to comment on at all?
Yeah, I agree that we start too early, and I think that it might work actually in certain situations, but in majority of the products or services I was working on, it didn't work. And definitely that's not the best approach without understanding the problem. And you're right, our customers don't have, the designs, they haven't thought through exactly what they're planning to do. And very important when you ask them that question, why? So as you said, if someone is saying because they want something to be cheaper, what does that really mean? An example I can give you for this one is when I was working with one government organization, everyone was saying, we just moved on to cloud. It's very expensive. We don't have much experience. We're paying a lot of money. It doesn't really meet our needs. And we haven't moved a lot of applications onto cloud yet. And we want definitely to make it cheaper. And then I just started asking more questions around, like, what does it mean really cheaper? What was expensive? Or is it about, the bill that you get every month from, Google Cloud Platform, Amazon Web Services, or Azure? What does that really mean? Is it about the bill or is it about something else? And then when you have that conversation, you find out that what they actually mean is not, they don't want to decrease the bill that they pay for using cloud. They just want value for money. So for example, if there are certain resources, on cloud that you don't need them, like for example, there's all the machines on overnight, you don't need it because the services are not critical, or they don't need to be supported 24/7, then actually you can just turn it off. Or if there are any other things that you don't use or you just use for training, you can in a very simple way, you can just, design that also like technology solution, how it's going to work for you so that you can have it cheaper. But it doesn't mean that it's necessarily making that kind of, cost lower. It's what I've learned is just really about actually paying more, but paying more for something that makes sense, that we're using, that we benefit from, that our customers will also benefit from as the end result. So I think very often we just use our own assumptions, what we think people say. But for this one, I like kind of uncovering that language, decomposing the language to truly understand what people do really mean.
Yes.
And in 99% of the cases, I learn new things that they mean something different what they say.
Yeah. Well, then you advance the thinking for everyone, because you've had a proper discussion about what the problem is.
Exactly.
Yeah. And everyone normally looks back and says, "Oh, it's so simple." But
yes,
but it takes a lot of time to simplify things. Yeah.
Absolutely. And this is what we said, it's not easy.
Yeah.
It requires a lot of other techniques, the way how you ask questions, open questions, so that a customer can actually find out what do they really need.
Yes.
Rather than what they think they want to do. Obviously, no one wants to pay high bills at the end of the month, but we can make it more effective, or tailor that kind of service or product towards everyone's needs. And I think that's the goal we're trying to achieve here.
Got it. You mentioned open questions, and most of the folks I think watching will know what that means. But for those that don't, a closed question would be, do you like this screen? And the answer would be yes or no. That's a closed question because you've not really got much back from the person you're speaking to. An open question might be, can you tell me all the things that you really like about this screen, and then maybe some of the things you don't like? I mean, it's not a great example, Iwona, but open question is one of the sort of really early things you pick up in consulting, and it's such a powerful thing to use. And the other one is the just keep asking why, isn't it? I can't remember if it's the 7 whys or however many whys, but keep asking why until the person opposite says, I need a cup of coffee. And then you've probably got to the right level.
100%. It's so important. And I think, again, for me, it was my personal journey when I started having these conversations on a different level was really trying to understand my customers. I was going to mention another thing when we talk to our customers. Obviously, active listening, open questions, but then also asking open questions, I would add, maybe on very different levels. So what I mean by that is that we can also, for example, through observation of a customer in that real environment, we can observe how they actually interact with our product. So I think if we want to take it even to a higher level, we could potentially, depending on our possibilities and again logistics and the product, we could organize a kind of situation where we can observe our customers, because again, everything that will be coming from customers will be in certain way censored through them or by themselves.
Yeah.
So what we hear from them is that kind of one particular scenario, but actually seeing our customers interacting with a product is a different thing. And again, it's not easy to facilitate that process, to create that environment or to even ask for permission. It's really difficult, but I think we can learn so much and we can have a totally different type of insights from this. Also, for example, asking questions like, how do you feel about certain things? How does it sound to you, using different expressions or different styles? As we know, some people like seeing things, other people are good listeners, they like talking. So it's about, I think, designing also that approach and that engagement, how we can best target that particular customer or that customer group. So we can have that communication channel and ask them questions about how they feel. How do they, as you said, how do they like something? What do they don't like about certain thing? So yes, it's so interesting. There's so much to this. I think what I would definitely strongly recommend is that everyone, no matter what your role is in your organization, in your own company, even if you talk to anyone, even your friends, I think practicing this different technique and trying to have that empathy and actively listen to someone, that can really open your eyes.
Absolutely. And there's so many things going on just in that sort of customer/user research that you were referring to. I've done the observation in the lean context with, I think they call it the day in the life of, where you follow someone for the day, or normally it's over a few days, to observe, what they're doing. I think the other one is you've got to be really careful about feedback, because people who feedback to you might be the loud minority. You've always got to think about the silent majority potentially. And also when people are asked directly for feedback, sometimes they'll filter it by being polite. Or they'll be so upset with the product that they just don't really want to give anything. There'll be a very sort of almost misdirecting feedback because it's just not something they're interested in. So there's sort of sampling techniques. There's all sorts, isn't there? And I suppose there's a lot of technology emerging that's increasingly allowing you to see a product being used, and actually the sample size is everyone. So you don't have to worry about sampling anymore. But that used to be a thing. And I suppose the other one I've seen used to varying degrees is the sort of the model office. But again, I suppose you've got to be careful that you don't create this sort of artificial world that doesn't really exist. So sometimes I find model office is more useful for the project team to get their head around conceptualizing what it is that's being created. So I wanted to ask you a quick question about, just to go back a little bit about what we'd said about don't start doing any development until you're bursting to do it, sort of thing. But I wanted to kind of qualify that, because I think from researching this, if you do take all that time up front and you also think about the scenario of future change, you're then putting yourself in the position to be able to rapidly respond to change. And I'll give a really poor example. If we designed a car really quickly that could only go forwards, and then we discovered we needed to go in reverse, we'd have to completely re-engineer parts of the car. We'd have to come up with a gearbox that we hadn't thought of. But if we'd really thought about it, early on, even though the customer wanted us to move forwards initially, we'd all sat down and thought, you know what, it's probably quite likely they're going to want to go in any direction. So they'll probably need a steering wheel. And I'm trying to sort of conceptualize it, and a lot of that thinking is about having experience, isn't it, in the particular space that you're talking about. It's quite difficult to kind of just come up with that from scratch. So do you sort of seek out particular subject matter experts when you're doing design, or how do we kind of mitigate against being in the room and doing the what we don't know kind of scenario?
It's very interesting, and I must admit that on my last project, that was actually the kind of different perspectives I was dealing with from different people who, on one hand, you have a very motivated, self-organized agile team who's very passionate and they want to start doing things. On the other hand, you have quite complex architecture and a big service, complex service that you're building, consisting of sub-services or sub-transactions. And then there is that point, okay, shall we start with something to deliver that minimum viable product? And this is, and it might be controversial, where, you need to kind of find the best solution that fits your product and also your context and your teams and organizational clients you're working with. And again, that wasn't easy because obviously we want to make sure that the teams have something to do, they can progress, they can also, do their own research and, or discovery and try to understand the customer. But from the design perspective, very often it appears that if we knew exactly what we're building as that, outcome at the end that we're trying to achieve, it would be really helpful. And I think, again, although it's not easy to answer that question, I think it does really depend on our strategy. And I'm going to quote one of my favorite books, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Start with the end goal in mind. One approach could be to design a car that can just move forward. But ultimately, if you know that you're going to have a fully functional car that you can also reverse, I think that perhaps wouldn't meet your needs or your customer needs. And I would ask a question, is it worth doing? Or is it worth spending more time during discovery or even some prototyping, trying to create some designs of that car earlier so that you can see if there is a better way of doing it with, all of the functionality. And here, although I'm a very enthusiastic Agile practitioner, I think that what we're trying to achieve in Agile is not necessarily just do the things that are the wrong things that will not meet our customer needs. So it's about designing something that makes sense, even if we know that we need to take a step back, do a little bit more discovery, design, try different options, design options. Sometimes it's not just one option, but you may end up having 10 different designs.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's not quick. It's not just that it's not easy, but it's also not quick. It's not fast.
Yeah.
It involves probably a lot of stakeholders from your organization.
Yeah.
You might be talking to, and that's, I think, that kind of complexity that is added on top of that, trying to design the best solution that is fit for purpose from the short-term perspective, but also long-term perspective.
Sure.
So for this one, I also, what I do is that I try to take that pragmatic approach.
Yeah.
So that it's not just, being agile at all costs, but it's doing something that makes sense for us in that time.
Yeah, I think
that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It makes a lot of sense. So I'm trying to remember if it was Peter Covey or was it Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? Was it Covey or someone else's name? I can't remember.
Uh,
I remember sort of a silver colored
yeah.
book. I read it ages
Yes.
ago.
Yeah.
That's a good one. We'll see if we can put a link to that for people to
Yeah.
see that in the description. The other thing I was going to say is, you associate Agile, or a lot of people associate Agile in technology with software development. We're talking about the alpha beta kind of process. I actually think that you could also insert a kind of a build or buy question, but again, wait until you've done that design thinking. Because if you create the design and you say, okay, if we take this into software now, we can, providing we're effective and we've got a good budget and this is a long-term thing, we can develop something. Yeah. But we might say, actually, that's going to be pretty expensive. It might not, but it could. And there is a product that's out there, but it only satisfies sort of 80% of our requirements. Is that your cat?
It
It's
is.
the
It is. Yes, he's very active right now.
It's an agile cat. What's the cat's name? We might as well announce its name, given it's appearing on the podcast. What's its name?
His name is Shinobi,
Nobody.
which actually means in Japanese ninja. So
Perfect. Well, that's
he's
about right.
exactly acting like that.
Although I think ninjas are meant to be sort of very quiet and sneak up on you. I think Shinobi's been a bit noisy today.
He is indeed.
Brilliant.
Apologies.
No. I love all this. I love that. So just going into that build versus buy, and then maybe you've got some software, and then maybe Mr. Pareto makes an appearance where you say, okay, we really understand the space. Actually, 20% of what's needed delivers 80% of the requirement. We could get this through software. Should we buy the software? And I'm just throwing this in, Rana. I know, but it is for a CTIO. It's a constant decision about, are we taking on too much development? Should we think about products, the build versus buy kind of thing?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think I am quite pragmatic. So whatever what works for an organization is, I think it's a good way forward. So I guess in that scenario, I would just consider what are the risks if we can hit this 80% of the requirements. Is that going to help us in any way? Probably yes, massively in 80%. But then what are the risks if we miss this 20%? And for example, if there is something significantly important that may change our direction. So that's obviously something we do need to consider. And we need to have that agreement with our stakeholders, with the teams, what's the best way to do.
Yeah.
But I think, again, what's perhaps not all of the teams are talking about is the risk.
Yeah.
And how we can measure the risk. And these are the scenarios that sometimes, you don't know what you don't know until you actually come across that problem.
Yeah.
So it's really, again, it's not easy to think about possible scenarios, but at least, you can organize that exercise with your team, with your stakeholders to try and understand what would be that risk from different perspectives, different angles. It can be technology, but it can be also design.
Yeah.
It can be relating to your customer. What could be the implications if you don't get it right?
Yeah.
Would that be, redesigning the whole solution, or would that be just a quick fix? And very often we can do things by quick fixes or by evolving the product or iterating the product later on and just adding more functionality on top of that. But in some situations, you do really need to redesign the things, which is taking enormously massive amount of time. And as we all know, for example, technical resources are very, very expensive.
Yeah.
And it's actually really hard to get, to have the right people with the right skills. So I would think about the risk, the implications, what if, how might we solve that problem in a different way? if we want something temporary, there are so many, probably there's so many ways how we can, solve that problem.
Yes.
So again, I think it depends on that strategy and what are the potential risks or assumptions that we might have about a certain solution moving forward, and then making an informed decision, which again, it's not easy, but I think data can definitely help with that as well.
Yeah.
Or certain metrics if we use them before.
One of the ways I think of what you've just described is, and particularly in the context of customer-centric agile. So we're saying that this is something that we've designed in a way that if the customer or the market needs change, we can change and rapidly adapt. That sounds to me like something we'd want to be famous for. I always say, in tech, in the context of the technology we're building for this business, what does technology need to be famous for? So in other words, it kind of tells you where your prime activity should be. And then that's probably where you're going to put the biggest investment, because there's a huge opportunity cost of doing software development in areas that you don't need to be famous for, because it's not core, it's not something, it could be something that's available off the shelf. But all that code that you have to maintain, everything else that goes along with the life of a computer-based product, becomes this massive opportunity cost that you can no longer. It sort of dilutes, because nobody's got an infinite budget. I mean, everyone has to do something, and even if you did have an infinite budget, businesses can't handle infinite change. So you've always got to kind of have that. So that design thinking that we were applying to this particular problem, I think you also, in business technology strategy, have to apply that design thinking to the entire enterprise, which really lets your brain go for a run.
It does. It does. Sometimes, if we don't lock ourselves in a certain box and we think out of the box, I think we can come up with great ideas. And then I think, I think it's really limitless. You can come up with anything you actually want to do. Then obviously we just need to consider how feasible something really is, or how much it's going to cost. But I think that there are so many opportunities, and I'm sure that there are so many things that, no one else has done it yet, that there's definitely a lot of potential. And I think, again, it depends on the organization. But when you said about technology, I think we should use technology so that it can benefit our products, our solutions, and our customers ultimately. There are obviously constraints, because just to give you as an example, you might be working, sometimes organizations want to do magic. They want to do great things with new technology that they have available. But very often they might have limitations in terms of how they have already set everything up, the infrastructure, how something currently works. And especially for older organizations or more traditional organizations or environment, it's much harder to make that change. And I think you're completely right. Even if we had, maximum budget, we can't have so many changes happening at the same time, because, when you try to modernize technology or to use new technology, that change always comes with people change.
Yes.
With people's roles and responsibilities, with new ways of working, new processes. It's changing the whole organization, and that has a massive impact on every role and actually every department, not just IT, but also, HR, how you hire people, what skills you're looking for, then how do you maintain and make sure that these people stay in your organization. What is the retention, and obviously finances, procurement, everything. It's really everything.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely massive. And I suppose just sort of trying to summarize a little bit, the customer comes first. I mean, that's such an old saying, isn't it?
Always.
But it's
always.
It's a really true, we're absolutely saying this is a real truth to that. So the customer always comes first. It's better to collaborate. than do sort of a command and control. So don't think of projects and we're just going to get on and deliver stuff. You've got to have a lot of thinking, and I think you've described lots of different areas that you would go to test and validate your thinking and design. I think that's sort of put all that energy into your design, and then you reap the benefits. You get to have that investment pays off over a series of years. And then your point that you were saying about some companies having quite a difficult context to achieve change. Sometimes that's referred to as legacy systems. That's a common term, and I love the expression I always use, which is you ask the farmer, can you tell me which way to London? How can I get to London? And the farmer replies, I wouldn't start from here. That kind of classic sort of legacy jigsaw that you have to kind of unpick. But I suppose if you take the customer-centric view that you're talking about, you're sort of removing legacy by creating a very responsive product and team, so that you're trying to, as much as possible, just be able to roll with the changes rather than go down some kind of legacy cul-de-sac, as it were.
Yeah.
Cool.
Definitely. And I think although we speak about the change as being very complex, I think although it is very complex, I think there is a way how we can even design the change in a way that has minimum impact on people, or it's done in a way that is not disruptive in our organizations. And I believe that every organization and every department and every team can start with where they are right now, because these changes are happening over sometimes even years, and obviously, it's very challenging to make any change rapidly in a disruptive way, because ultimately, when you want to do it quickly, you might get different results.
Yeah.
Or you're not gonna get that, user adoption within your organization as quickly as you would wish. So you need to really wait for these outcomes, and you need to manage change effectively to ensure that you get the return on investment soon, or within the period that is acceptable for you and your organization. That's why I think there's so much to it. When we think about Agile, for me, it's not just Agile. There's so many different things that we should be considering, like product, customer centricity, like change management, like strategy, leadership. There's really a lot of things that we need to consider. And I think having also all the, stakeholders, people supporting us, specialists and experts in different areas, I think that's the way to move forward, because obviously we don't know, especially at that early stage, what the right answer is. So that's why I think collaboration is really important, to make sure that we all collaborate on that change, what it is. It's making sure that we engage not just with the customers externally, but also internally. That's why when I speak about customers, for me, customers are also employees. Very often we might be building this different technology solutions for internal employees, for data people, for other, team that is benefiting from that. So that's why I think customer-centric approach can be applied not just towards your end customers, but also with regards to any person you work with.
Fantastic. So just sort of wrapping up really, but I think what you were just describing there is the big difference between a technology project and a business technology strategy and approach. All those elements that you're describing is really enabling you to marry up all these different elements of the business. It's an external, internal environment, everything else, with a really coherent technology strategy. It's not easy to do. So we're going to have some people listening to this thinking, I want a piece of the customer-centric Agile, please. What would you say to someone who's listening to this who says, I really want to They could be at various different stages. They might have been quite a long way down the agile route, but they might have been doing a series of kind of stop starts or discrete things and haven't really thought of this golden thread of the customer running through. So if you were to give anyone advice who was listening to say, how do I get started with this? What do they do? Rather, do they call you up, or what would you suggest folks do?
Sure. Of course, you can call me up anytime you wish. I don't mind. But I guess the way how I was starting with that is it's not a quick process to know everything. And I'm not saying I do know everything.
Yeah.
I know actually not much, because every situation is different, every organization and every client engagement I work on. But I guess starting small, focusing on one aspect, trying to understand that aspect. For example, we talk about customer centricity. So I would suggest perhaps some reading online, or also attending different meetup groups in London or worldwide. I think they are really good. And what I found really helpful in my case was to listen different case studies and people's experiences. It wasn't actually going to any traditional courses, getting certifications, but it was really about just talking to people, listening to their stories and trying to understand how they did something, what worked, what didn't work. So I still remember some of the stories, and I think that's something that I learned something not through myself doing mistakes, but already someone else has done it. It didn't work out. And I've got these learnings that then it really helps me to manage my kind of day-to-day work, or also work on any new product. So I think this is actually, that kind of practical experience is very important, obviously with addition of trying to practice all of the principles as we talked about.
Yes.
So as I said, you don't need to actually try to practice customer centricity in an IT team, but you can practice customer centricity in anything you do. When you go to a shop, when you buy some services, or especially if you have your own company, try to think about your customers. And here, I guess I would just advise to perhaps check online. There are different techniques, very good techniques, how you can understand your customers better. And then again, there is no rule or one solution to that.
Yeah.
Because all of the customers are very, very different. So it does really depend on that context. And unfortunately, I wish there was a magic pill, but there is no magic pill. And I think every organization, every team, and every person needs to work out for themselves.
Yeah, with their own journey. Well, I'm sure certs will be able to get some of those links. We might be able to put a page together.
We can definitely put more links.
So if folks are listening to this in the podcast, you can head over there, and we'll put a link in the podcast description so you know where to go. But that's sort of a starting point. So it sounds to me like this is what every business technology strategy needs. If you're going to try and deliver long-term value, which is the holy grail, I honestly think having the customer centricity, making it a customer-centric view, is a real penny dropping. It's so obvious, it's annoying moment for me as a kind of a lens to go into any business strategy, and it's a really good challenge because it's challenging everyone. Do we really understand our customer, and do we really understand the problems that we need to solve for them? Because that's going to give you just such a great insight and a kind of like I think the Americans would call it a North Star to head for in terms of making decisions, etc.
Yes, that's right. I think what's really helpful is that once when you do this exercise and you find out how wrong you've been about something, then it's a kind of addictive to pursue that path in whatever what you do, because you know how things may change depending on what you learn from your customer. And I think that's really so much insightful that I can't imagine any other piece of work without being customer centric.